which I want to review in order to get into this again. What constitutes really muktzah? Something which you're not allowed to carry out Shabbos. Obviously, something which constitutes muktzah is something which was designated for a also purpose, bein hashmashos, right? For instance, something a candle which you lit right before Shabbos and are using on Shabbos, right? The question is it anything you lit or only a designated object? And the mashal I gave last night, which still holds true tonight, believe it or not, is whether a candlestick versus a potato, right? If you use a candlestick to light candles, that of course is designated constantly for the purpose of lighting candles. If you use a potato, it's just a one-time job, right? Or it's obviously just a makeshift thing. So there are two opinions here. One opinion holds that only a kli hamiyuchad is also as muktzah, and then when the candle burns out, you may not move it on Shabbos. But a potato, you would be allowed to move once the potato burned out, right? Because now it's no longer has that yichud, reverts back to being a potato, right? Whereas the other opinion holds, no, once you designate even a potato to be a candlestick, so even once the candle burns out, you may not use that potato on Shabbos, nor move it, okay? So that's kol hamiyuchad, which means it's consistently and always designated for this purpose, versus kol sheyichdo, anything which you right now designated for that purpose, situationally speaking. Okay? So that's the machlokes we're dealing with. Now we're on the second to last line, the last one in the line. Masnisim pliga, the following Bryce, I believe it is, argues Amanda Mar. Now there's a typo here. It should be Amanda Mar kol sheyichdo leisur asur. Should be kol sheyichdo instead of kol amiyuchad. And the following statement we're going to make argues on the kuspara, which holds that even a potato is asur. How so? The tzina we learned ha'emet shalpi achavis. You have a stone on top of a barrel. Mata al tzira, you turn the barrel on its side, vinofelis, and the stone falls off. So hey, wait a minute. We're assuming that you designated the barrel to be a base for the stone. Yet nonetheless, you're allowed to toss the stone off and move the barrel. So that clearly indicates that the barrel, once the stone is off, reverts back to a barrel. So the potato should revert back to a potato. So it's a kasha on the opinion which holds that kol sheyichdo is asur. Then anything which is even ad hoc designated is considered to be designated. Rabbi Babashir Rabbi Barashi Pasala Rav B'Shocheyach. He explained that it's talking about where you forgot. In other words, you forgot the stone on top. And this is in fact the halacha. Basis only becomes a basis l'davar asur if you intentionally left the muktzah object on top of the basis. But if you forgot it up there, it doesn't become a basis. So that's not even considered to be yichud, right? Even the opinion which holds kol sheyichdo, anything which you designate even ad hoc, requires some form of designation. Not that you forgot it here. So since here was an episode of forgetfulness, that's why it's not a problem to knock it off on Shabbos and move the barrel.
Could they have given the excuse that there was something inside the barrel, like food or drink that you needed?
They could have. I don't know why they didn't. They could have said something like that. More later on, in fact, will say something similar, but the Gemara here does not bring that in.
What is the more fundamental principle that they're making by saying that they forgot?
Right. Okay. Well, mean the basra. Obviously, they're right. The Gemara is giving a stronger answer. That's true. Well, mean the basra. Let me bring you proof. The end of the brisa. The end of the brisa said, "Hoisa ben achavios." The thing's actually Mishnah later on. Hoisa ben achavios. If it was a barrel among barrels, magbiha. Umatal tzita vinofelis. You can pick it up and turn on its side and it'll fall. So is that talking also about forgetting? Says more yes. Hodu pasal arav b'shochech. They also say about when you forgot it. So there's no proof from that. Masnisa plegal. Now it's bringing kash in the other direction. The following brisa argues. Again, I don't know. I think it's a Mishnah. The following Mishnah argues on the opinion which holds mandamar kolam yuchad leisur asur. It argues on the svara which holds that only if it's consistently designated for that purpose does it become muktzah. The tzina, what do we learn? Koifin salif ne'afroichim. You can turn over a basket in front of chicks. Shiyalu v'shiyerdu, that they may go up and down. Now. It says there, Vitani Allah, concerning this, it says in a brisa, Olu me'alein, also l'taltalon. If the chicks went up on their own, and started using this basket, you're not allowed to move the basket. Why not? This is surely not something which is constantly used by chicks. So it's certainly not something constantly used by chicks. It only could fall under the rubric of prohibition if it's something which is kol sheyichto aser, even ad hoc designation. So how could this be aser according to the opinion which holds that's only something which is miyuchad, which is constantly designated for that purpose is aser. So Rabbun Bar Chia, Rabbi Zira, Tipater explained is talking about bimos. It's about where the vessel is repugnant. And that's a different kind of muktzah. What kind of muktzah is that? Muktzah machmas mius. What?
Only according to
Why only according to Rabbi Yehuda?
Shimon would say it doesn't hold by it.
He also holds muktzah machmas mius. Shimon also holds muktzah machmas mius. The only one he doesn't hold the muktzah machmas isser, but muktzah machmas mius he holds. We're going to have that explicitly. It's coming up. Okay? Says more Amarle. So he said to Vatani Rabbi Yoshia, wait a minute. Then Rabbi Yoshia say afilu tirkov, even a seah or a tirkov, a smaller vessel, is also not movable. Once the chicks start using it. So it says So it's either a question which is not answered or a response. I don't know which one, but either he's answering no. This is talking about a smaller vessel which also got repugnant, or it's part continuation of the question, and the continuation of the question is can you say that the smaller vessels are repugnant? But in any event, the answer is probably yes, that they are, and therefore they too cannot be moved again because it's a different kind of muktzah, not muktzah machmas isser, not because they're designated for a purpose, or either because they become repugnant. Rav Yirmiyah B'Shem Rav said halacha Rabbi Meir. Look, Rabbi Meir, which is in fact the way we paskin, is that once a candlestick is lit on Erev Shabbos, that's it for the rest of Shabbos. For the duration remains also. Shmuel Amar halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel says halacha Rabbi Yehuda that it does not remain also. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that Rabbi Shimon that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. I forgot what the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is in this case. I know all over Rabbi Yehuda holds muktzah and Rabbi Shimon doesn't. But there's also a difference here. You're right. Yeah, I know you're right. So I see it. Rabbi Yehuda says here that muktzah machmas mius, that the candle, the thing is later on it doesn't seem that way. Okay, I take it back. I can see you totally. I throw in the towel. You're right. Rabbi Shimon says Rabbi Shimon is the one who holds that. I just looked ahead. That was my mistake. Okay, sorry. Rabbi Shimon says that muktzah there isn't muktzah. What? Yeah. Rabbi Shimon says there's no muktzah machmas mius. Rabbi Yehuda holds that there is. So that's the gradations. Rabbi Meir holds once the candlestick is lit, that's it. Can't move for Esher Shabbos no matter what. Rabbi Yehuda holds that once the candlestick goes out, you could theoretically move it unless it's repugnant. Or unless it's made out of pottery. Generally speaking, it's considered to be repugnant because it gets oily and ucky. And Rabbi Shimon holds that even if it gets repugnant, you're still allowed to move it. So those are the three gradations. Okay. Says the Gemara, Bon Kumi Rabbi Shimon Levi. Bon Kumi Rabbi Yochanan. Went back one. Bon Rabbi Yochanan Atmat Omar. What do you say? How do you paskin? Amar Lon, so he said to him, Ani Ainli Elo Mishnah. I only have a Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? You carry any candle except for a candle which was lit on Shabbos. It's like Rabbi Meir, once it was lit, that's it. It's forbidden for the rest of Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Hore Ba'al Artar Bulis, some city. Menorah Ketana Mutza L'Taltula. It was a small candlestick you're allowed to carry. Now, this is a different kind of muktzah. It's not the same muktzah. There's muktzah machmas ches from Kisir. They're saying menorah ketana you're allowed to carry. Why is that? Because it's cheap. So it's cheap. You're not koveh for it a place. You don't designate a specific place for it. But a menorah gedoyla, a fancy leichter, they're not allowed to carry on Shabbos because the muktzah machmas ches from Kis. Okay? Rabbi Chelbo, Rabbi Avo had a machlokas about this, or rather, they didn't argue about it directly. But Kumi Rabbi Chelbo lo marbin. In Rabbi Chelbo's house, they wouldn't move the small menorah. Kumi Rabbi Avo marbin. In Rabbi Avo's house, they would move it. Rabbi Yasa Salik Rabbi Tanchum Bar Chia. Rabbi Yasa went in front of Rabbi Tanchum Bar Chia. Boy, Maver Teikamoy, and he wanted to move an oar in front of him. Omar Lay. So Rabbi Tanchum said to him, Bitfanenu, you're going to move a menorah, a small menorah in front of us? Vos for a chutzpah? We don't hold it's mutter, we hold it's osir, right? Rabbi Yossi Gli Law, Salik Kumi Rabbi Yossi Ben Chanina. Ba Marvte. Similarly, Rabbi Yossi went in front of Rabbi Yossi Ben Chanina and wanted to move the menorah. Amalei said, Man Sharalach, who permitted it for you, you're not allowed to move it in front of us. Ashkechei Rav Rabbi Yechanan. Ashkechas, we find. Rav Rabbi Yechanan, Elaine the Asri, are those who are moving the small menorah. Chada, that's one opinion. Rabbi Shub and Levi Shimon Lakish, Elaine the Shari, they're the ones who are matir. Chada, that's the other opinion. Rabbi Lezer ben Chanina told over, Maisa Hoya, there was a certain Maisa, the Tiltlu Pumet. The truth is that's really the end of the sugya. There's a new sugya. Lezer China told over Namaisa. Okay, we didn't come to any resolution what the status of Menorah Ketana is. Nowadays, of course, we would regard it as a klisha mlachtul isser, not as mukta machmas chesun kis. Mukta machmas chesun kis would be only silver, something or gold. But something expensive, something cheap would only be a klisha mlachtul isser, and you'd be allowed to move it like if you had a cheap candlestick, you're allowed to move it to crack nuts on Shabbos or something like that.
What you can learn from this is that
if you didn't light on it, that Shabbos.
When the Roman do is the Romans do. When you're in someone's house, you honor their
minhagim. Right. Okay. So it says what are we? Oh, sorry. That's good. Lezer Rechina said Ma'aseh of a tiltlu pumet mitachas haner b'Shabbos. Sort of Ma'aseh which happened where they moved a candlestick from under the candle. Now this is you have to be aware. We're talking about oil candles. So actually, on top of the candlestick there was another container which held the oil. Okay, that's critical. So what are we talking about? Manakim, Ikrai Meir, if it's talking about right Meir, who says once you lit in it, it's also afilu pumet yeh also. Even the candlestick should be mutter to also to move. In Rabbi Shimon, it's going like Rabbi Shimon, who holds there is no mukta machmas mius. Right? So afilu in there yeh mutter. Even the candle should be permissible, right? Even the actual container which holds the oil should be permissible. Elokenu Kermit, what are we talking about? We're talking about Rabbi Yehuda. Like Rabbi Yehuda. To Rabbi Yehuda do Amar Ner Mos. Rabbi Yehuda says that the candle is repugnant, therefore you can't move it. Pomot Eino Mos. The candlestick is not Mos. Now this is a yisoid which we're going to see again more explicitly on Daf Chav Zayin. The Vilna Shas brings it down here. I don't know if the Babli has this yisod. I don't think it does. There's no basis for davar aser by davar amos. If you put this case over here, you put a barrel, let's say, under a very repugnant thing, right? Which is muktzah in of itself, because we hold the concept muktzah machmas mius. The barrel does not become a basis. A basis davar is only to another kind of muktzah, not the muktzah machmas mius. And therefore you're allowed to move the barrel, which is underneath the repugnant thing. Okay? Or, here in this case, the candlestick, which is underneath the repugnant container for the candle. Okay, and as I said, it's in the Vilna Shas here, but it's going to be almost explicit, if not explicit later on.
Now, in order to move that barrel, you have to pick up the
well, or else you go shouldn't care. Or tilt to me that side, push it off or something like that. The thing is, Tani nershu munach hagabe tavla, along those lines, if you have a candle on top of a tray, Messiah is the tablet of Aner Neufel. You can move the tablet and the candle will fall. Now, Rabbi Yochanan said, "Karvu level ideichim chatas." We do this when the candle is lit, then you might be chayav chatas. What?
Start a fire.
You might start a fire, right? With fun of why? Because if it falls towards the wick, right? How mishumavir? So then you're creating greater fire. Lach, if it falls away from the wick, mishum then you are diminishing the fire. Shmuel bar Abba, Kumi Rabbi said, Kumi Rabbi Yasi, obviously bikava. Of course, when can you knock it off? Only when it's extinguished. Amalei. So Rabbi Yechon said, may you have tranquility of mind, which is similar to Yasher Koyach. I appreciate you explaining to me that it's talking about specifically in a case where the candle was already extinguished. Mana Kayamin. Says the Gemara, what are we talking about? In Krabi Meir, again the same question. If it's like a Meir, even the tablet should be basis l'davar also, shouldn't be allowed to move it. It's a basis for a forbidden thing. In Krabi Shimon, it's about like Krabi Shimon, afilu nerya mutter. Even the candle itself should be mutter because it's he doesn't hold the muktzah machmas meals. Elakan Krabi Yehuda, rather it's called Krabi Yehuda. Same thing we said before. The Rabbi Yehuda, my ner mos, the candle is repugnant. Tavla ain't a musa. The tablet is not repugnant, and therefore it's mutter to move. It's not a basis of davros. Tani, we learned. Im hitno alav ayeh mutter. Now this is talking about the candlestick itself, right? And it's talking about the Mashbiach explains. It's talking about we're talking about the candle, not the candlestick, the candle. The candle is repugnant. Says the Gemara, Greisa Chiddush, this Brisa says a very big Chiddush, that by Muktzah Machmas Mius you can make a Tanai. And say, I'm making a Tanai, a condition that I should be able to move this Muktzah. Says the Gemara, what's going on here? Mana Kami, what are we talking about? In Kramer, if I made like Ramer, it's an absolute category of Muktzah. Filhit no Lavier also, even if they made a Tanai, it should be also. In Krabi Shimon, if it's like Rabbi Shimon, Afiluloid no Lavier Mutter. Even if they make a Tanai, it's permissible, right? So it says, what we talk about, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Nar Mos. Rabbi Yehuda says there is a concept of Muktzah Machmas Mius. Truth is like Rabbi Meir, it's the reason why it's awesome for sure, even without a Tanai, is not because it's Muktzah Machmas Mius, because that's exactly the issue. Perhaps by Muktzah Machmas Mius we're saying a Tanai does work. Rather, Rabbi Meir is asking because they're talking about a candle which was lit on Erev Shabbos, right? So that's why he says it's absolutely forbidden to move it even if you made a condition. Because the condition doesn't work on a candle which you lit from before Shabbos. So
I don't understand. What's the Tanai that he's making?
To me, it's not Mos.
You can say that?
Right. You can make the declaration. That's the Chiddush here. It's a very big Chiddush, but that's the Chiddush. Obviously, it's the Rabbanon, so he holds we can make such conditions. Again, now, the other Gemara throws in, but it's Mashbiach takes it out because it's really not relevant here. Tavla ain't a musa, the tablet is not mos, right? It's obviously referring back to previous, so it's out of place. Ma chamis meimer.
It's totally out of left field, and I know it doesn't make sense, but for some reason, there seems to be the working of Tanai in Yerushalmi. For example, Ma'aser Sheni.
Yeah.
It's totally out of left field. It's really out of left field. I understand. Has
Nonetheless, you're about to impress us.
I gotta do that. No, I'm not.
Go ahead. Yes.
Ma'aser Sheni, we learned that you can make a Tanai, and that the walls of Yerushalayim are not kotos, do not gather in the Ma'aser Sheni. If you make your own Tanai.
Okay.
Well, it seems like for some reason the use of a Tanai seems very acceptable here.
That's a very good point. I mean, you'll need more examples. Perhaps we will see tonight. Right. That's an interesting point to make, that Tanai gives you much more flexibility, the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, even in areas where we don't normally expect to find it. That may be. Okay, that's an interesting point. We'll have to see if that follows through. So, says the Gemara, so what do you want to say? We're like Rabbi Yehuda, and here the Gemara just goes completely awry. We're going to learn now a segment which has nothing to do with our sugya. We don't know how plop down here. We'll come back to our sugya momentarily. It's like a break for station identification here. Okay? Word from our sponsors, actually. All right, now, so therefore the Mashbiach changes the next word. Everybody changes, really. It shouldn't be ditani, it should be tani. Again, this is totally out of left field, nothing to do with what we just learned. Tani. If you have a candle right behind your door, you're allowed to open and close it on Shabbos. When you open and close it, a gush of wind might come in, a burst of wind might come in and make it flare up. As long as your intent is not to make it go up or down, it's a davar she'eino miskaven, it's mutter. Okay. Now maybe this is another one of those proof. We still haven't seen any definite proof yet, but maybe we could say here that the Yerushalmi doesn't know psik ratio is also. But the truth is it's not a psik ratio, so I don't know. It's not. This is our heter for refrigerators, right? Because it's not a psik ratio, it's going to happen. So I don't think this is a proof of anything. Rav Shmuel, however, they said pachle b'shocheach. They said where you forgot So you put the candle there, not intentionally, they ain't allowed to open and close the door. But they cursed people who did so intentionally. They said, Yichras Hashem liish, asher yasena erev oina. May God wipe out such a person, cut off such a person who does such despicable acts like Er and Oina. And Er and Oina were the two sons of Yehuda who sinned. Here it's a different kind of sin, but they use that pasuk. What? Yeah, it's a very strange, it's strong, but it's like Poretz Geder Yishcheru Nochash, though, right? Some of you, punishment beyond proportions. Now,
connection of this Gemara was to the previous Gemara about when it tilted over the lit candle, it might go out.
Oh, that's good. That's not bad. Yeah, that's tilted. So the tiny should be on top. That's very good. Nobody else says that, but you're right. It definitely should be on top. The tiny is the reason why you can. It's similar to the previous Gemara. Very good. A+. Okay? So says the Gemara, now we get back to the sugya which we were in before. Mani Slay, I mean, this is obviously, there's a sefer, there's a Kabbalistic sefer called Raziel HaMalach. So Raziel HaMalach there's some people keeping their cars for good luck. So the Raziel HaMalach is a totally, what? You have it in your house? It's out of character. So,
you're right.
So it's on a dashboard, like the chitas of the Lubavitchers. So it's totally unintelligible. So Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan writes, the reason why that's true is because at the printer, when it was first printed, the galleys fell on the floor. They're gathered up out of order. Now they proofread it afterwards, but the proofreader, he didn't know any Kabbalah, so he just checked for typos. He didn't check for any constructs, so therefore the sefer is totally out of order, even though every word is accurate. So the same thing applies here. Obviously, this page of Yerushalmi. Somebody threw up the page and it came down, and things got put on the page as they came down. Okay, says the Gemara. Getting back to the previous sugya, Man Islay Kolam Yuchad Le'Isser Asur. Who's the one who says anything which is designated for the prohibited purpose is forbidden? Lo Rabbi Meir, is it not Rabbi Meir? So that's the case. He can't be the one who's the Tana here. Have a man who permitted you to make a t'nai. Have a man Tana Hisna Allah Mutter. Who's the one who says you make a addition? It's Mutter. Rabbi Shimon. Typo. It's Rabbi Yehuda. It's supposed to be Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? That's Rabbi Yehuda is the one who made it because Rabbi Shimon holds you don't need a condition. Avo. However, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees. Perhaps even Rabbi Shimon agrees. Avokos v'karav ashashis. If you have a cup, not a candlestick and not a potato, if you have a cup or a saucer or a shashis is also some sort of container, a big cup, a lamp. Even though they got extinguished, you're not allowed to use them. Why is that? Rabbi Tavi said, I feel like Rabbi Shimon. Even like Rabbi Shimon who doesn't know muktzah machmas mius, by these things, which are not mos, you're not allowed to use them even after they go out. Why is that? To Amar, Taman Motu, even they said by muktzah machmas, it's okay. Ha moide hu achash asir, it concedes when it's asir. Shim oimrat lo shu mutter, if you're going to tell them it's mutter to use these, afu mechabel son mishtamish b'on, the phrase is going to extinguish the candle early. I'm not making this up, that's what it says here. He's going to extinguish the candle and use the vessel.
Because these are other objects that you could use for...
Right, they have dual use, right.
Candlestick holder you just use for a candlestick.
Right, so that would be okay, but not over here because they're dual use, we're afraid you're going to extinguish.
I think a shashis is a lantern.
Yeah, he says lamp, which is a lantern. Yeah. Okay, says we're Rabbi Mona because Mesav and Sovereign. Originally, we thought, Maymar to say Ma Pligun. When do they argue? Bo so shekava. When they argue by candle which got extinguished. In the case b'shagoru achbarim esapsil where the mice remove the wick, or the Mashbiach saying change that word to afusa, where the wick has been totally burnt down, like ephes, burnt down to nothing, because the wick is muktzah, right? So when could you move the candle? Only if the wick is gone somehow, right? Or even where the mice did not remove the wick, or the wick did not get eliminated. But besides the wick, there's also oil, because then there's a davar mutter and a davar also, right? The davar also is the wick, the davar mutter, the permitted substance, is the oil. However, Tamatzina, we learned over there, Noita lo adam es beno, a person can carry his son, v'evan biyodo, even if he's holding onto a stone. V'kal kola, or a basket, v'em b'sochim, and there's a stone in there. The tiny debase Rebbe, and we learned in the house of Rebbe, he who said that you need, besides the stone, also food in the basket, that's the bus of Rasa Ramuter, lo havin omrin klum. They didn't say anything, meaning it's not correct. Even if there's nothing else in the basket besides the stone, you'd still carry the basket. So, Sharei, what's the proof of that? Sharei Rabbi Rumnus. Rabbi Rumnus was one of the foremost students of Yerushalmi, went to Yerushalmi in Zroim. Rabbi Rumnus is one of the foremost students of Rabbi Yehuda. He had two major students who don't appear ever in the Bavli, Rabbi Rumnus and Rabbi Afas. I think they appear once in the Bavli. I forget which Masechta. So they were his great students. So Rabbi Rumnus, Hoti Machta Mishel Beis Rebbe, he once took a shovel out of the house of Rebbe, Melech Yerushalmi Shabbos, so all it had was hot coals. Nothing mutter in it. So we see that there's no basis of davar aser in essence, right? Even if the only thing left in there is so you can still move it. So Islach lemeimar gabi gecholim afuso zayin. Can you say by that can you say by gecholim afuso zayin? And next one, what's the next word that looks like? Elo. Oh, it says Mashbiach, it's not Elo. It's in Yerushalmi. Elo can mean Olo, right? Like we had, what's the word? The law is da Elo, right? So here's the opposite. Elo is Olo. Olo sheyesh b'socho shemen. So in other words, the coals don't fall into either of the categories. They're not afusos. They're obviously still wick there, which is the coal, and they're not a case where it's a basis davar aser mutter, because there's nothing equivalent to the oil in the coal shovel. So it must be that you don't need to have something else other than the wick, and it must be that you don't need to have the wick disappear altogether, even if it's just the wick. Like here, it's just the coal. It's still permissible to carry. The truth is, I don't know. You don't really need the mashbiach. You can read it like this: Is a member gabi yicholim afutu same elish or elishiesh b'sochol shemen, that there's no more coal, or that there's oil in there. Obviously, it's not comparable. So says Mar Amri Abi Avo Kiyamte. I resolved it. Kartim shel bosim hayaba. Besides the charcoal, there's also incense, perfume in there. And therefore, taka was a basis davar aser mutter. The shovel had something equivalent to oil in it. What was that? The crystals of perfume. Okay? Of incense. Rabbi Bar Bechia b'shem Rabbi Yochanan said, tarkus also tatlo. What's a tarkus? It's a large trunk. Okay? It's which you put a lot of clothing. Now, Hori Rabbi Yami mutter. Rabbi Yami said it's mutter. The reason why it's also to carry, says the Pnei Moshe, is because of muktzah machmas chesron kis. Seems like it's a large container. It's not a steamer trunk which you carry, but it's rather more like I guess drawers which you don't or an aron, which a closet which you don't usually carry from place to place. Okay. I don't know if I call muktzah machmas chesron kis in this case, even though it's the same svar. It's because of its heaviness, but because it's heavy, so you don't normally move it. So that's the same thing as muktzah machmas chesron kis. It's called ve'el lo makom. Okay. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah Chami lo metatlei goes sidra Rabba. Rabbi Yirmiyah said it's mutter. Rabbi Yirmiyah saw that they were carrying a big closet of this sort into the big base medrash. Sidra Rabbah is the big base medrash. The law of a mamcha biyot, he didn't protest when they did it. So it must be that it's taka mutter because it's not like chesron kis, right? Chesron kis is very expensive. This is not very expensive, just very heavy. There's no such category of muktzah l'maisa.
But there's a certain amount of tircha to carry this heavy thing. So isn't that generally more?
Tircha is mutter, except in a certain case. Later in Masechta we're going to talk about tircha. But generally speaking, tircha is not also on Shabbos. unless it's tircha and something which is muktzah or not proper to move. But generally, to being tircha is mutter. Okay, says Gemara. The base Rabbi now this is a new issue. The base Rabbi ad sholosh kikise is that of left field. You have ladders. So a ladder with 3 rungs is like a chair. It's like a sulam. From there on in, it's like a like a ladder. What's the difference? We'll see in a minute. On Rabbi Yisrael Rabban, Mandashari, you says you're allowed to move it like a chair. Rabbi Shimon. It's like Rabbi Shimon. The Tani we learned lo yigaro dam samita vesakisa vesasaf so sakachadra. Person not allowed to move a bed, a chair, a bench, or a easy chair because you're making a furrow in the ground. Rabbi Shimon permits you to do so because it's a davar sheni miskabi. You don't intend to make the furrow. So here too, when we say it's like a chair, you're allowed to move it, right? Right? Rabbi B'Shem, Rabbi Chun, Rabbi Chag, Rabbi Shem, Rabbi Zira, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Hillel said, Moni Chachon, Rabbi Shimon, Chachon Ketzit, Rabbi Shimon, B'Kisei Sheraglo Meshukos Petit. If you have a chair which legs are already stuck in the mud, then Mutzatavli allowed to pick them out of the mud, right? Because you're not doing it, not making any furrow there, you're just removing it. K'mai the Tema Mutzatavlo. Just like you're allowed to pick it up, you're also allowed to put it back as well. That's also true. Rabbi Yisrael said, when we talked about the difference between 3 rungs and 4 rungs, what were we talking about? So, Rabbi Yisrael, Afana Mitzvah Shabbos. You can move them on Shabbos, right? Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Boon, Rabbi Shimon here. Rabbi Yisrael Boon said, this is Rabbi Shimon. Alright, Rabbi Yisrael Boon, Masisa Amrake. True that we have a mission like this. Kol came and the growing b'Shabbos. You can't drag any vessel, chutz mina gola, except for a wagon, because it doesn't dig, it packs the dirt down under the wheel. So the same thing is true here as well. You're allowed to move anything which is not going to make a hole, and this smaller ladder is not going to make a hole. Rabbi Huna b'Shem Rabbi said, Lian Shabbos Yisamaris. This distinction between this 3 and 4 rung ladder is vis-a-vis Shabbos. You're allowed to drag and invest only 3 rungs. You're not allowed to drag and invest 4 rungs. Okay? Chizkiah b'Shem the base Rabbi Yanai said, "Lina chazaka sitzamers." It's in terms of chazaka. Interesting. Chazaka means if I put a ladder to my 2nd floor of Dovkat in your backyard for 3 years, I get to have it forever. That's called cheskas tashmishin. So it's only if it's a 4-rung ladder, because that's a ladder. A 3-rung ladder is not considered to be a ladder. And therefore it's like lawn furniture, and there's no chazaka for lawn furniture. No, there is such a thing. Yeah, it's the first break of Bobas, not the 3rd. So, Chizkiah b'Shem the base Rabbi Yanai said, Liya chazakas yisamers. Rabbi Yosef b'Shem Rabbi Yanai said, Liya tuma yisamers. So about tuma, how many rungs have to be missing in order to be not considered to be a ladder? So, it has to be missing 3 or 4 rungs, depending not to be considered to be a ladder. Alright, we'll stop here for now. It'll take about 10 minutes after tomorrow, we'll be able to finish the 2 blocks. We were talking about the what difference is between the 3-rung ladder and the 4-rung ladder. Okay, so 3-rung ladders, it's like a chair. Now, after 4 rungs, it's no longer a chair. And the nafkamina here, the carbonator brings down is that when it has 3 rungs and it's like a chair, so then it's tamei moshav. Somebody sits in it as a din of a chair, right? So, very often you have a step stool, which is like a chair, so if a zav sits in it, it's a tamei moshav. If it's more than 3 steps high, it's 4 steps high, so it's no longer considered to be a stool or a chair, it's considered to be actually a ladder. And a ladder is not metame because of moshav.
Even though it has a base kiva where someone can sit down.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's not considered to be a ladder. It's still considered to be beyond a ladder. Okay? Says Gemara, maybe it's made with a seat, and obviously it still retains the shape of a ladder. It's talking about all things being equal. It looks like a step ladder, not like a seat. So if it has 3 rungs, it's still low enough to be considered a seat by its nature. If it has 4 rungs, it's no longer considered to be a seat by its nature. Okay? Rabbi Yaakov, we're 5 lines before the Mishnah now. Rabbi Yaakov Bar Chanina and Rabbi Yasi b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan said, getting back to way back when, Menor Ketana Muta L'Tautla. It's a small menorah, you're allowed to carry it. The low klihu, of course, why not? It's a keli. Anything in your house is muchan. Now, it might be klishim lachtu liser, but still a keli allowed to carry it, right? For the tzarech gufa makoma. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Boon, what's the chiddush? So Rabbi Yosef, I'm going to tell you what the chiddush is. Tipater shalach leimol l'schora. They have a case where you designated it for the purpose of merchandising, for the purpose of sale. So I might say it's muktzah. Why? Because it was designated out. Not for your own purposes, but rather designated for the purpose of sale, right? So I might say since it's designated for commercial purposes, muktzah. The chiddush is that that's not enough to make it muktzah. Or, another scenario, very interesting one, is where it came Friday afternoon, it came in the mail Friday afternoon, for low Shabbos b'nei klum, and you didn't hear about it before Shabbos. So I might say in that case it's not muchan, right? Nonetheless, it's considered to be sufficiently muchan, again, because we said it has to be, in order to be not muchan, what it has to be, is that tachinu biyadayim, like grogros and simukim, like the dates and raisins, which you consciously, shove aside. This, where you got a package in the mail Friday afternoon and didn't open it, so that's not considered to be dachin, that you cast it aside, and therefore you're allowed to carry it on Shabbos. That's a chiddush that the small minority allowed to carry on Shabbos. Okay? Otherwise, it's not no chiddush. Inherently, there's no chiddush in the small menorah, because as we said, it's like any other keli which should be allowed to carry. Nosim kli tachas ner l'kabel netzotzos was allowed to put a vessel under a candle in order to receive sparks. Now the sparks are sparks of flaming oil, globs of flaming oil. Okay? You're allowed to put a vessel there. You should not put water in there because it's going to extinguish the sparks. Now, here's a couple of typos here in the Gemara. The next word is a mistake. No steam kli tachas in there. Here it says you're allowed to put a vessel under the candle. L'kabel nitzotzos, in order to receive the sparks. You're just not allowed to put water in order to extinguish. Yet elsewhere we say ein. There's a word missing. It should be ein no steam kli tachas in there, right? So you're not allowed to. So how do we reconcile the two different statements? Says the Gemara, kanshi yesh lo tzarich b'shemen, kanshi ein lo tzarich b'nitzotzos. Depends whether you need the oil or you don't need the nitzotzos, which is the oil as well. I mean, if you need it, so it's bad. Why? Because this oil is muktzah. Since the oil was where in Erev Shabbos? In a candle, right? So therefore, if you want to collect the oil in the vessel, and you then to put it there, then you're being mevato kli mehechono, right? You're negating the purpose of the vessel on Shabbos. Take a perfectly good vessel, putting it under candles, right, where it's going to drip, where oil is going to drip down, which is muktzah. Then you won't be allowed to move the keli because the keli becomes a base for an also thing. That's also doing Shabbos. If you don't need the oil, so the oil is just a nuisance to you. So in that case, the oil, even after the vessel collects oil, you'll still be allowed to move it, right? Because you're not mevatel it. You don't negate its significance vis-a-vis the oil. So therefore, in that case, you'd be allowed to put it underneath of the oil on Shabbos.
Is it a mius though?
What?
Is it a mius?
No. Talking about where it's not a kli cheres. Well, either a mius candle is a kli cheres where it was used constantly, consistently for several weeks for that. Not a one-time job. I don't think that makes it the most. Water because you're extinguishing. Rabbi Shmuel b'shem Rabbi Zira said to Rabbi Yossi, this is like Rabbi Yossi. What Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi holds later on. He holds later on in the Masechta. They're not allowed to fill. If you have a fire which you don't want to spray, you're not allowed to fill vessels which will burst in the heat with water in order that the water should gush out and extinguish the fire. So even though it's indirect. So here too, you're not allowed to do it either. It's like Rabbi Yossi. Like Rabbanan over there, it'd be mutter. Says Gemara. Now the dalet is a mistake. Should be Rabbi Yossi, and this is not the same Rabbi Yossi, because in the Yerushalmi there's an Amoira by the name of Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi, the Amora said, Havinan Savri Meimar, we want to say perhaps Ma Pligin, Raimei Rabbanon, where do Rabban Raimei argue on Rabbi Yossi, B'sh'asa Mechitza Shel Kalim, where you make a wall of vessels. In other words, even Raimei and Rabbanon who argue Rabbi Yossi over there, would not let you put water down right next to the fire. All they let you do is put vessels filled with water which will burst when the heat gets them. So it's indirect, but not direct, right? However, If you made a wall of water itself, that's no good. But Rabbi Shmuel b'shem Rabbi Zira, that which Rabbi Shmuel said named Rabbi Zira, dear Rabbi Yossi, that our Mishnah, which forbids putting the water in the vessel to catch the oil, is only like Rabbi Yossi. So Hadam Ra Filu Asa Mechitza Shamayim Machlokas, that teaches us that even where the wall is made out of water, the same Machlokas applies. Because we're saying that our Mishnah, where you're making the wall out of water, is only Rabbi Yossi, which sounds like Rabbanan would agree. Rabbanan would disagree and say that if you made the wall out of even directly out of water, which in effect would be the case if you put water in a vessel which is catching the oil, right? So that would be mutter as well. So therefore, the machlokas Rabbi Yossi Rabbanan must not just be by kalim, which you fill with water, but even where you have the water standing in and of itself next to the fire. In that case, Rabbi Yossi disallows that, and Rabbanan do allow you to put the water next to the fire, and the fire will go out when it reaches the water. Okay? I forget the way you pass it. All right. Hajjal Akira, new parak. Bameh toimdin, uvameh ein toimdin. What can you insulate and what may you not insulate? So you're not allowed to be insulated with the dovram. Is it fevel, something which adds heat? Lo b'gefetz, not with the sesame peat. Lo b'zevel, not in fertilizer. Lo b'melach, not in salt. Lo b'seed, not in plaster. Lo b'chol, or lime, to be more specific. Lo b'chol, not in sand. Bein lachem innovation, all these substances where they are moist or dry are forbidden. Lo b'teven, not in straw. Lo b'muchin, not in pieces of cloth. Lo b'zugin, I forgot what zugin are. Bizman shein lachin, when they are moist. Avotoyim be'em k'shevation, but all these substances are used when they're dry. Tovim Ksus was allowed to put it into actual clothing, the perus, and in fruit, uvekan fiyona, in dove wings, uvenorish pishton, and in fine ground flax or linen, uvenisor shel charoshim, in splinters from a woodsmith. Daka, if it's thin. Rabbi Yossi said Daka says not allowed to use it if it's thin consistency. Ma'at b'gas allowed to use thick sawdust, not fine sawdust. Now, what's it? Why are all the things of the racial officer? Because they boil. Umartich, and they cause to boil. Now, in Bavli it goes on to saying, therefore you might come to rake coals. To let you do atmana, insulated something which adds heat, so you might come to rake coals. Not the Yerushalmi. Says Yerushalmi. So what's going to happen since they provide heat? So they're going to get too hot. V'notlon, and you're going to take the pot and you're hot, so it cools down a bit. Vein toshim, and then they all fall in on themselves. Vein toshim l'tzoch yodo, toshim, so they crumble into his hands. Umagziron, then you're going to put it back. You're going to put then when your pot cools down, but you're going to put it back. Umagziron ve'mosim are going to put the pot back in order to get hot again. At that point, what are you doing? You're moving muktzah. What muktzah are you moving? What muktzah are you going to move? The coals, right. In other words, since the reason why you're not allowed to do atmana on this stuff is because since they get hot, they add heat, your pot might get too hot, it might burn. So you're going to take it out and then want to put it back later on. But by the time you want to put it back later on, maybe the place where the pot was sitting no longer exists because all the stuff slipped and slid into where the depression was. And then you're going to start moving it back into place. That's no good, right? Because at that point, you're moving the stuff which is forbidden to move on Shabbos, okay? You're not allowed to move the shop. Well, actually, the way the Ritbaz pointed out on the bottom, it's not because of moving muktzah, but rather because that's like doing a new atmana on Shabbos. Whatever way you look at it, it's going to be gzeira. That's the bottom line I'm trying to express here. It's either gzeira that you might come to move muktzah, which in and of itself is a gzeira, or it's a gzeira you might come to do atmana on Shabbos, which in and of itself is a gzeira d'Rabbanan, right? But the isser on atmana b'davar moisiv hevel is an indirect one. Not that because you might come to rake coals, but because you might come to put it back, which might lead you to something else, to do fresh atmana on Shabbos, or to move muktzah. So by definition, it's going to be a gzeira. Lefi also litmom. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the Rabbi Elazar kupa matal tzida v'noito. If you want to move something out of a basket, you put it on its side and take it out, so that later on you'll be able to put it back in. This is talking about even where it's a davar she'eino mosif hevel. When you take the pot out, you have to take it out sideways to make sure you don't lose your indentation. U'Rabbanan the Talmud, and like Rabbanan Bavel, Dinu Namrin, they say, Im oisa yura mutter. If you use the davar mosif hevel, but you didn't put it directly on the pot, you put a casing around the pot, right? A yura means like a pot around the pot. So then things are not going to fall down, right? Your atmana will remain intact even if you move it. So in that case, it's mutter. Only in a case where we're afraid everything is going to slip, slide down. That's where we have a problem. Okay, and there we learned Safek Chashecha, Safek Lo Chashecha, when you're allowed to do atmana, only if it's still a question if it's nightfall or not. It's not yet dark. But once it's dark, it's also do atmana, right? So therefore, in this case here, where we don't allow you to take out lest you come to do a new atmana. Why talking out to atmana on Shabbos? And this, what's the difference? You're only preserving heat, right? So Taman Armin in Eretz Yisrael they said, in Bavel they said, they bittul beis hamedrash, because if you let people go attend to their needs on Shabbos, so instead of going to your shiur Friday night, they're going to start doing their atmana. So we don't like that, right? Rabbi Abba, different reason. Yivnei chashat, because of suspicion. Shim omer lo shumutar afuenu osa so called tzorka mibod yom. We suspect if he'll just put it off, stam. What's the nafkin between the two reasons? What's the tell mitzvah? Afu so called tzorka mibod yom. He makes sure to take care of it all during the day. What's between the two reasons? Litmon sheleg v'tzoyne. If you want to do atman on something cold, al daited Rabbi Ba. According to Rabbi Ba, it's permissible, right? Because people are not going to say Rabbi Ba is afraid of chashad. It's really Maris Ayin issue. People are going to see you doing atman. People are going to say, "Oh, you're allowed to cook on Shabbos," or this guy might have cooked on Shabbos. So that's and put off his stuff till Shabbos, right? So that's only also if you're going to be matmin something hot, because then people say, "Oh, what's going on? Maybe he did some stuff on Shabbos proper. Maybe allowed to do stuff on Shabbos proper." But if it's cold, that's not relevant, because to preserve the cold of something, right? So obviously nobody's going to think that you can come to cook on Shabbos. However, al daiti the rabbanon the tamon asur, according to the rabbis over there in Babel, it's also why, because if you do atmana on Shabbos, right, even being matmin something cold, so you're going to be bittul beis hamedrash, so you wouldn't be allowed to insulate something cold on Shabbos either. L'maisa we pass, of course, insulating something cold is mutter on Shabbos, only insulating hot. But here there was a svara in Bavel that even cold things should be also insulated on Shabbos, unless you come to involve yourself in insulation as opposed to in Talmud Torah. We will stop here for this evening.
Times have changed. That was the only reason why someone would be involved.
Yeah, because they were too involved doing atmana.